Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa has defended government's transformation policy and pleaded with State Inquiry Chair, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, not to scrap the ANC's deployment committee. Ramaphosa conceded that at times people had been nominated to positions for which they weren't qualified. For more on whether the ANC's deployment policy has led to the collapse of the public services, state capture, and the breakdown of the economy, we're joined by political analyst and Democracy Works Foundation Chair, William Gumede. Mr. Gumede, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time tonight on News at Prime. The argument has long been made that this policy of cadre deployment by the ANC is in fact what has provided a foundation or even an enabling environment for the kind of corruption and, if you will, state capture that has taken place. Your views?
Yes, no, good evening. Definitely, it has created an enabling environment for lack of state capacity, poor public services, and also for corruption. Because what happens, the ANC has deployment committees at every level. So there's a national deployment committee, then there's provincial ones, and then ones at municipal level. So then what happens, these committees meet, and then they decide who should be appointed, at the sphere. So, municipality level, for example, the deployment committee would decide who should be the municipal mayor and so on. But they also decide, who will get key contracts, critical contracts, whether it's housing, whether it's health, whether it's infrastructure. Now, the problem is often, people who get these contracts or who are appointed to states entities are often appointed on the basis of their loyalty to the ANC rather than based on competency. That's where our problems start.
Do you feel, after listening to the President's testimony this past week, that even though there is an acknowledgement that in many ways the failures of the officials that have been deployed under this policy have contributed to the collapse of the state, but despite that, there doesn't seem to be a change of heart in terms of changing things or the way in which things are done going forward? Do you get a sense that things could well change?
In the president's testimony, I didn't get any idea that, that the president wanted to change that, or there's a change in the will of the ANC, because, it's a lack of political will. The system, of course, is as it is now, deployment is working for the ANC members. Of course, it's not working for the country. It's not working for the state. So we'll need lots of political will to turn it around. What it means is, you see the recycling of people. You're saying people become, say the CEO of one entity of the other. I mean, Brimo Leff is one of the examples. It goes from Transnet CEO to Eskom CEO. So through this cadre deployment, we get the same people. So what I do is you really recycle incompetency and corruption from one entity to the other, and then you destroy these entities. But maybe, from a bigger point of view, it means that, all the talent in the country, whether black or white, are just marginalized. You'll never, talented people that the country needs will never get opportunity, to be appointed either to senior positions of the state or executive members of state-owned companies and so on. So it means it's an opportunity lost for the society. We are struggling with complex development challenges, where we really need the best talent of South Africa, to be in the right places. But if you're not part of that narrow circle of cadres connected, to the ruling party or even to a faction in the ruling party, the talented never get to the positions in the state.
One of the arguments, again, made by the president is that it's not cadre deployment in itself as a policy that is failing this country, but rather how it has been implemented. And that if that was changed, if it was the process itself was strengthened, the outcomes would be different. Do you have reason to believe that?
No, I disagree with you totally, because, if you look at history, not only, since the end of colonialism in Africa, but in Southeast Asia, where we've seen in places like, South Korea and Japan, and Singapore, where we have seen the most successful transformation that the world has ever seen. among developing countries. Very few of these countries, or these countries didn't have cadre development policies. What they did is, and that's the difference between them and South Africa, and them and the rest of Africa who failed, many countries who failed in Africa, is the fact that they have included all of the talent in those countries. So they would go and look and find people who are talented in the country beyond the ruling party. And that is important. So, I think we have to get rid of that deployment policy and then make, the process of appointment, the process of getting contracts in government, make it merit-based. Let's get everyone, if you are a really good entrepreneur, let people competitively bid. Not to nominate a company which is close to the ANC. And the same with the individuals. I think that's going to be important. If we don't change it, if the argument is among many ANC leaders that, well, actually, we just need to tweak this deployment policy. It is a good policy, but it's wrongly implemented. Then it's going to be a disaster. Because we see the consequences already in terms of political instability in the country. Because if you appoint poor, incompetent people or corrupt people to deliver services, they don't. Then people protest, and they protest violently, and we create instability in the country. Also, what it means, if you get incompetent company that's deployment committee has proposed to hire, they don't deliver the services, or they increase their prices beyond the market price. It also displays genuine entrepreneurs, black and white ones, who they don't get access to the state, and they close down. Then you have just these incompetent companies set up to get these tenders, who don't create jobs, they only create jobs for themselves. And then the legitimate companies who could create jobs, and they close down.
One of the weaknesses that has been identified even through the Commission where this policy is concerned is around accountability. Now, in a country where the majority of those who do go to the polls and vote choose the ANC as a political party, but they're not necessarily members of the organization. So they're closed off from the internal processes and mechanisms of accountability. How do we begin to ensure that that still happens within broader society? Do you think that there are ways that it can be done? Or because this deployment committee does its work solely within the ambit of this organization, it means that whatever it is South Africans say about it will always just be limited to opinion and not necessarily have any true influence within the organization?
That's the case. Unfortunately, not even ANC members have much of an influence to change policies in their own party now, let alone just the supporters or people who are not even supporters. They're really outside. And that's the problem. We really have to get it out of the situation where a small group of people in the country decide who should be appointed to senior positions in the state, who should get contracts, and who should be in the country. Because, that has been the failure of every liberation movement, African liberation movement, since the Second World War. So for the last 100 years, the failures of other liberation movements has been because small groups of people run the countries, they run their parties, and they only govern, with a very small group of people. I think most probably civil society, the media, and ordinary citizens, we haven't done enough to educate ordinary citizens to be a little more discriminatory, and also for people to make the link between the people that they vote in and how those people perform. For example, if you're going to vote in a person who's corrupt, you're going to get a corrupt government, you're not going to get a job, you're not going to get services. We have to make that link to people. And I think, often people do not understand the importance of getting the right people, getting competent people, getting honest people, getting people with the right values. Because if you don't get those type of people, you're going to get people who are, those people are going to govern corruptly, incompetently, and we're not going to get the public services. we're going to get a corruption, and so on.
William Gumede is with the Democracy Works Foundation. Thanks for your time tonight.